Hello everyone, welcome back to the Artless Dialogue and our career questions video. And this week we got a question from a subscriber, a viewer, and they asked us, when you start a new job or you're early in your career, how can you set SMART objectives? So SMART doesn't mean intelligent, it means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound objectives. And that's quite a mouthful, but SMART is the word to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So Ash, what do you think? How can a person new in his career set SMART objectives?
So I probably say this every episode, but again, this is quite a common question we get, and generally speaking, it's because people have joined, organizations, and it might be their first job in a corporate or a first job in a large organization,
Yep.
and they kind of go, right, well, how do I now track towards something, right? And because people end up, the danger is if you don't, you end up just doing work, and you end up just being busy. And I remember when I kind of first joined kind of the corporate space, that's probably my one, if I was to going back and talk to myself, however many years ago it was, I'd probably give myself that advice to go, right, set yourself some SMART objectives.
Yeah.
And the bit that for me, that's probably, all of the letters and, in that SMART acronym are important. But for me, there's some that are kind of really more important for me anyway. So one, it's got to be kind of specific, right? You've got to be specific about what you want to try and do, and it's aspirational. So you don't have to, say I'm going to go and do this, this, and this, because you can't tell the future, right? So, but you can certainly go in a direction, because what the point of SMART objectives means, the decisions you make beyond that, below that, around it, are all in line with those objectives. So if you're specific, you know what you want to do, when you want to do it, broadly speaking, where you want to get to in terms of an outcome, right? So now you can be quite targeted and specific with what you're learning. Because say, for example, you've just come into an organization, then if your objective is, well, I just want to learn my job. People say that I just want to settle in and learn my job, right? But immediately you go, right, but specific, right? So what does that mean? What's learning your job mean for you?
Yeah.
And then suddenly people start thinking about it. And well, actually, I need to know A, B, and C technical stuff, right? Okay, well, that's now specific, right? Measurable. How do you know when you've done that? Well, if it's a qualification, right? Okay, but what are you hoping to achieve? Just completing the qualification? Are you going for a merit? What's the thing? Right? Time bound. Right? How long do you want to take to do this? And suddenly you go, because people go, I really struggle with a career plan. Well, this is kind of what you're doing here by setting your, objectives and goals at the beginning like that.
Yeah.
And so then you've got yourself a kind of a clear view of what you're going to do, how you're going to achieve it, when you're going to achieve it, and it gives you a sense of control. Because that's the other thing. You're in a new organization. There's probably a bit of uncomfortableness, uncertainty. And the lesson learned for me was, don't rely on your line manager to always provide them for you, because they're busy and they've got a day job, and so you might need to wait. You might be waiting 6 months. You might be waiting a year before you get them. So hence why it's always important to kind of go in and create and influence those yourself, and then you get some control of your destiny.
I think you're quite right on these points, and some are sometimes more some of those SMART characteristics, they're important than others or harder than others. But I'm thinking, when you're new in a firm, you don't usually have responsibility over a whole project. So it's hard to say what my day or what my work will look like 2 months in advance. And hence it's hard to, in the traditional sense, set SMART objectives, because when you think of a SMART objective, you think, okay, I'm going to work with X number of clients resolving their queries in X amount of time over the next 4 months. But when you're new, when you're an analyst or an associate, very junior in like when you just started your career, it's not easy to look that far ahead and then set objectives. So I think that's a big problem that new professionals have. And I think one way you can solve that problem is you can actually lower the scale and scope of what smart objective means, instead of looking big picture at projects or at outputs or at deliverables, because that's not always going to be in your control at such a junior level. You can look at smaller things, team-based or individual things. Okay, how long should I spend on a problem before reaching out to someone else, to a senior in my group? You don't want to spend hours on a project. So consistently set time that I'm going to spend 20 minutes on this problem. If I can't solve it, it'll be more worthwhile to reach out to a senior. Or similarly, another thing was that how fast can you respond to queries? Because your manager may say, okay, here's a data set, try to find me these values, these amounts, or these insights from this data, and then set yourself a time, okay, I'll get back to them in 2 hours while managing the rest of my workload. So try to make those smart objectives smaller and more applicable in different scenarios, instead of like, I'll get this project done in 3 months. I'll pass 3 exams in 1 year or something like that. So I think that's a different way of looking at those, especially if you don't know how the next 4 months of your work life are going to look like.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I love an analogy. So it's kind of like, when you get a new jigsaw, and what you don't do is just immediately build it all, because you have no idea how it all comes together, and you certainly don't build it without understanding what the big picture looks like. So it's kind of like that. Step one is, right, well, you take it out of the box and you open it, and then you look at the picture on the front and you go, right, I'm going to make, this jigsaw's got 100 beams on it, and they all look the same. But the point is, you look at the big picture. You need to understand the big picture. And to what you're describing, exactly that, which is, if I'm new into an organization now, I want to understand, the environment. I want to understand where I fit in that. I want to understand what the stakeholders are. So there's smaller objectives which then allow you to build the bigger ones. And those objectives you can still make smart, because you go, right, well, I want to know what stakeholders are, right? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I need to know immediately who the stakeholders I'm going to be working with, every week, right? I need to understand who they are, right? Okay. I need to understand what their role is and what my role is in relation to them, right? Got that, right? And now we need to understand, what my team does, what its objectives are. Has it got a strategy, right? And suddenly you start kind of, a bit like a ripple effect. Those objectives get broader and broader and broader. And then eventually, like you said, few weeks in, few months in, you then start getting, work thrown your way, actual work, time-bound pieces of work. And so then your objectives can be combination of, right, really focused things, right? You've given me this thing and it's time-bound X, Y, and Z. And it's sometimes harder because sometimes you get an outcome to achieve and they don't tell you the time, and they say, right, well, we want you to come up with a marketing campaign, or we want you to design a product, or we want you to go and do some research. And so again, you then, describe that same process. You be specific. You talk to the line manager, you talk to your stakeholders, you try to create a boundary around your objective. And that's really why that S step is so critical, and it's at the beginning.
Yes.
Because often I find, if people are coming in either new or inexperienced, they're off. They're off running away, and the specificity hasn't happened. And I say inexperienced, I've seen experienced people do that, being given an objective, and the S isn't clear, and they're off. And sometimes they deliver things late, right? And then they go, well, that was late. I needed this a week earlier. Well, no one specified that, or the quality's not there. And they're like, well, I assumed this is what you wanted. Well, you didn't specify that. So it becomes really important just in, not only for someone new into an organization, but if you want to progress through an organization, and we talked a bit, an episode or so ago about performance versus progression. That's a classic one where performance, if you're clear on your objectives, you can then evidence half year, end of year, these were my objectives. This is what I delivered. And then if you've got objectives plus, here's all the other cool stuff I did. Here's what you asked me to do. Here's the extra 10, 15% I delivered. You can start doing that because you've quantified it. But if you haven't quantified it, then you'll probably find, scope creep. Someone asks you to do a bit extra, and someone asks you to do a bit extra. And before you know it,
you don't know where you were originally.
Exactly. You don't know where the start ended, But as far as the person who's giving you the objective is concerned, you just delivered the objective.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there frustrated, going, no, but I did loads more because you kept adding onto it and kept adding onto it, but you've never specified it, you've never agreed it, you never kind of put a boundary around it. So it helps with lots of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point you touched on as well, because whenever you get a task or you get a problem to solve, I think the first step you should do is take a deep breath and start asking questions. Ask
Yeah,
the dumb questions, the ones you think are not important, just so you know everything about it. Because once you know the
yeah,
crux of the problem, the root cause,
yeah,
the every other aspect that is related to the problem, then you can solve it better. Then you can deliver
yeah,
on that project better. So I think your
yeah,
point on making it specific, it's very important. I also
yeah,
thought, because this question was also from the perspective of someone early in the career, and of course you
yeah,
touched on that. I came up with a few examples of things you could do that would sit in every most roles that you're in at the start of your career. So one of them I thought was networking. A
yeah,
smart objective that you can set for yourself is, I'm going to talk to two new people every month and build a relationship. Now, that's time bound, that's specific. You can make it specific. I'm going to talk to two new people in my team, two new people outside my team, two new people above my level. So you can make it specific in different ways and time bound, and try to make it relevant to your career goals and your job, your
yeah,
work. If you're in sales, try to talk to two new people who could be potential clients or every month. So I think that's one way. That's a smart objective
yeah,
that I think you can use in regardless of whatever career you're in. Another
yeah,
one was, each and every company these days has internal courses that you can
yeah,
choose to learn from on an optional or compulsory basis. So I think some of your smart objectives could be around those courses at your um,
yeah,
organization that you work for. And another thing I thought was volunteering in your team for certain activities. You may not be able to work or volunteer for trainings because you're junior and you have less
yeah,
experience, but you can volunteer for things like, I'm going to handle all the socials for the team, or I'm going to
yeah,
try to be the mental health champion for the team, or
yeah,
I'm going to, yeah, so forth. So there are a lot of ways you can set smart objectives that can impact your team and your work, and that can put you
yeah,
in a good spot when it comes to year-end reviews as well.
yeah.
So I think it's about
No, I think like great examples. Yeah,
thinking a
great
bit
examples.
creatively as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think they're really good examples for anyone kind of on that journey. And I think the networking, and I'd kind of wrap that up into kind of stakeholder.
Yes.
Honestly, I can't emphasize enough, right? Any role, doesn't matter if you're new in a role or you're establishing a role or you've just joined a new team, stakeholder map is the first thing you should be doing, because you need to understand who your, people you should be influencing, who are your stakeholders, how you interact with them, even down to kind of, and I usually build this picture in my head, what kind of communication style I want to use with them, what kind of communication style do they receive versus give? What's the relationship? What's the environment? Because if you nail that, and that should be your first step in any role, stakeholders, because that's the environment you're operating in. All the knowledge in the world, doesn't matter how technical you are, or how good you are, or how effective you are at doing your job. If you don't get that, then you're kind of still shooting in the dark a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how people skip that and jump straight into the doing. And you go, yeah, you need to understand that. And so your point about networking, spot on, because if you're new in an organization, you need to build that you built your stakeholder map as to what it looks like, but you've probably got no networks in any of that.
Hmm.
And so networking then is right. How do I now get access to some of that?
Yeah.
And it's a really good objective, because it's an ongoing objective.
Hmm.
Networking is constantly like, again, most of my objectives, this sort of stuff is in my head, but networking always on my objective. Communication always in my objective.
Yeah.
Refreshing my stakeholder map always in my objective, because those are three things that help me do my day job. And if I don't do those three things well, then everything else I do is kind of a little bit irrelevant. So those are things I'm constantly kind of refreshing. But no, I think some really useful tips there. Hopefully that kind of answers the question of our listener, but they can let us know if it didn't. I'm sure we can explain more in more detail.
Yeah, in the comments. Maybe I actually get some comments on the YouTube channel as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
we've had a couple, but we always could do with more. So it's always good to know when people are listening, because clearly people are watching, which is fantastic.
Yes.
As we celebrated our 500 subscriber the other day, so it's amazing. But it's always good to kind of hear back how people are responding to this, which would be fantastic.
If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And if you want similar content, check out our other videos.